Adventure Time is over, and the Distance Island series is also over. The next is the Fionna and Cake series. But wait, who are Fionna and Cake? That's Fionna and Cake. And in this episode, we found out that the Ice King was composing fairy tales about a world completely similar to the one in which they live, where there are the same areas as in the Adventure Time world, such as the Candy Kingdom and the Treehouse. But the characters are the same as the characters in the original world, but with opposite races. Instead of the two males, Finn the human and Jake the dog, this fantasy world has human Fionna and cat Cake in it. And here we understand that they are two fictional characters created by the Ice King, and they are the heroines in the world created by the Ice King. And they're not two characters in the world of Finn and Jake, and all their adventures were written by the Ice King. Also, all the characters in Fionna and Cake's world have their genders reversed. In the Fionna and Cake episode, we are introduced to the Gum Prince, who is a version of the Gum Princess. And we got to know Marshall Lee, who is a clone of Marceline, and we got to know the Ice Queen. And it's the Ice King version. Well, the question here is why the new king made fictional stories about a world in which the characters are of opposite races. And the answer is simple at the end of the Fionna and Cake episode. Fionna said, "There is one person I would do anything to be his girlfriend. He is the Ice King, and I can't wait to marry him." So one of the reasons why the Ice King wrote these fairy tales is in order to fill his emotional void and make him feel that the heroine of the story, Fionna, loves him and wishes to marry him. It sounds simple, but it's deeper than you can imagine. First, who is the Ice King? I'm not talking about this deranged person who freezes everyone with his ice. I'm talking about his past before he went crazy. As we know, the Ice King was an ordinary human named Simon Patrikoff. He had a fiancée named Betty and was living during the Mushroom War. It was during this period that Simon received the crown, which changed his life forever. The crown made him gain the ability to control ice and made his skin turn blue. His nose became longer and his hair became white. He gradually lost his mind and memory over time. The crown made Simon able to survive the Mushroom War. He also managed to protect the baby Marceline, whose mother died. But the more Simon kept wearing the crown, the more he lost his mind. When he removes the crown, he regains consciousness temporarily. And during these periods when he removes the crown, he begins to realize that his fiancée Betty left him because of his transformation, and because of the madness he did when he was wearing the crown. He recorded tapes in which he apologizes to anyone who hurt him during his placement of the crown because he does not control himself, and showed grief in those tapes for the loss of his fiancée Betty. And Simon at that time wrote poems for the child Marceline. In it, he described his condition after wearing the crown, including the poem I Remember You. Among other things, Simon said in this song to Marceline, "This must be very confusing for a little girl. And I know you're going to need me here with you, but I'm losing myself, and I'm afraid you're going to lose me too. This magic keeps me alive, but it makes me crazy and I have to protect you. But who will protect me? Please forgive me for everything I do when I don't remember you." "I don't remember what you said, Marceline, but I remember seeing you frowning, and I swear to you that it wasn't me. It was the crown. This magic keeps me alive, but it makes me crazy, and I have to protect you. But who will protect me?" Sometime after this poem, Simon left Marceline alone so as not to harm her further. And so Simon spent many years in which he completely lost his mind and lived for more than 1,000 years thanks to the magic of the crown. And the crown made him completely forget all his past, and no one accompanied him in this life because of his madness, and also because most of the people either migrated to the islands or died in the war. Simon finds no friends but penguins, being the only animals that endure to live in his icy environment. So he lived with her, and among the penguins he found was a mutant penguin named Orgalorg, and he was very close to him, and he named him Gunter, because everyone who puts the crown names his best friend Gunter. And so we got to the current Ice King, and the emotional void still exists in his heart because of his loneliness and Betty's separation from him 1,000 years ago. But the painful thing is that he doesn't remember Betty, and he doesn't remember anything about his past at all. All he knows is that he is lonely and sad, and that there is an emotional void in his heart that he does not know the cause of. And because of this emotional emptiness, he began to kidnap the princesses of the land of Ooh and torture them. And the most important thing he did was he wrote the stories of Fionna and Cake. Fairy tales from the world of Fi. The heroine Fionna loves him and wishes to marry him. And that's how we got Fionna and Cake's world. A world that Simon adapted from the reality in which he lives, but with opposite races, to make the heroine fall in love with him. And this is the main reason why the Ice King made the world of Fionna and Cake. We move on to the 8th episode of the 5th season, entitled The Mystery Dungeon. Shelby, Tritranx, Lemon Crow, and Neptor wake up with the Ice King in a huge multi-room dungeon and discover that they have to cross many rooms and challenges in order to get to the room in the middle of the rooms and be able to survive and get out. They go through many adventures during the dungeon that continue throughout the episode. And at the end, when they reach the room in the middle of the rooms, we find out that it was the Ice King who brought them here. He kidnapped them in order to help him get through the maze of this dungeon, in order to get to the room where the old sleeping magician is. And he's a magician who can bring things to life. And the reason the Ice King wanted to reach him was because he wanted to make Fionna and Cake's fantasy world book turn into reality. The Ice King has always wanted to meet Fionna, the only woman in the universe who loves him and wishes to marry him. And now he will finally be able to meet her and Cake and see the other characters he has composed. So he throws Fionna's book and Cake on the flames coming out of the old sleeping magician's body. However, it is the book itself that has come alive, not what is written inside it. The Ice King got angry and became very sad that he would not be able to meet any of his characters that he had composed. He picked up the living book and sat on the grass as the sun set, and Nebthor told him to make him happy that he could always see his characters that he had composed. He can always do that, but inside the garden of his imagination. And indeed, the episode ends with the poor Ice King addressing Fionna with all the love inside his imagination and convincing himself that dreams can come true someday. We turn to the 11th episode of the 5th season, titled Bad Little Boy, where we see the Ice King has kidnapped a group of princesses and put them in cages as usual and forced them to listen to his narration of one of Fionna and Cake's stories. We see the Doctor, who is the male version of the Doctor Who character in the original Adventure Time universe, and we see him running away from Fionna and Cake after stealing the Enchiridion book from them. However, Fionna and Cake are unable to retrieve the book from the Doctor. And do you know who intervened to save them? He is the Ice King. There is supposedly no Ice King in Fionna and Cake's world because there is already an Ice Queen. But it seems that after Nebtor previously told the Ice King that he could achieve the impossible in his imagination, the Ice King does not mind adding himself as a hero protecting Fionna and Cake in his stories that he composes. The Ice King later returns the book to Fionna and Cake, and she rejoices and she and Cake hug him. Tears begin to fall from the eyes of the Ice King, and he says, "I'm so glad you're real." The three of them then embark on an adventure into outer space. We then return to the real world where the captured princesses interrupt the Ice King and tell him that his stories are very bad. And note that the book from which the Ice King is reading is not the same as the one that became alive earlier, which means that the Ice King wrote many books about the stories of Fionna and Cake, and not just one. However, Marceline shows up and frees the princesses from their cages and begs permission. Simon, it's her turn to try, is to tell them a story about Fionna and Cake's world. In the story I told, Marshall Lee appears above the treehouse, and Fionna and Cake go up to him, and he tells them that the lumpy space prince, he is going to have a party in the woods that night, and before hearing whether they want to go with him or not, Marshall Lee turned into a bat form, carried them, and flew towards the forest. And Marshall Lee gets on the catwalk with Fionna and Cake. They sing a beautiful song, and at the end, Fionna tells Marshall Lee that she came with him because she only considers him a friend of hers. Marshall Lee starts teasing her for a laugh and slaps Cake on the cheek, which is when Fionna gets annoyed with him. They leave the party and Marshall Lee catches up with them and annoys Fionna even more by kidnapping Cake from her, but Cake manages to return to Fionna thanks to her magical stretching abilities. And in the end, in order for Marshall Lee to attract their sympathy, he represents that there is a spear thrust into his heart. He dies, causing Fionna and Cake to worry about him. "I think this is the end of me, Fionna. Why don't you confess your love to me?" Fionna is shocked and tears her eyes. I'm surprised Marshall said that. Disapproving of his thought that she loves him, she does not feel any feelings of love for him. Marshall admits that he was acting and that the spear was not inside his body. Fionna punches him very hard on the cheek and approaches him and punches him more as revenge for his deception and annoying her and Cake. The end. The princesses are happy to hear this story, unlike the story of the Ice King, and the Ice King is upset because he is convinced that his story and style of composition are much better than Marceline. So he orders everyone to leave. After everyone has left, Simon decides to go down to a secret room in his mansion. On it is the logo of Fiona's hat, and he opens the door and enters the room, which turns out to be a huge hall filled with books, copies, chapters, and huge numbers of Fionna and Cake stories that he composed. The Ice King walks up to Fionna and Cake in front of 2 huge ice statues and tells them, "I know you're somewhere out there, but I just haven't figured out how to get to you yet. But believe me, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out." We move on to the 9th episode of the 6th season entitled The Prince Who Wanted Everything, where the lumpy space princess has composed a new story about the world of Fionna and Cake, which is unusual because the Ice King is the creator of the world of Fionna and Cake, and he is the only one who has been composing stories about this world. It seems that the news has spread in the land of Ooh, and some people have become fond of the world of Fionna and Cake and write their own fairy tales about this world, which are unofficial stories, of course, because they are not authored by the Ice King. That's why we see in this episode that the princess summoned the Ice King to tell in his voice her story, that she wrote about the character of the lumpy space prince. In fact, the story is an ordinary adventure and there were no important details in it. We move on to the 9th episode of the 8th season entitled 5 Short Tables. It is similar to the title of an episode from the 4th season in which Kepper narrated 5 short grables on one common theme. The common theme was the 5 senses. But in this episode, it is the Ice King who will tell 5 short stories that revolve around a common theme. And this time, the 5 stories are not real stories like Kuiper's stories because he was telling real stories that happened in the past. But this time, the stories are written by the Ice King about the world of Fionna and Cake. Through the events of these stories, we got acquainted with the character of Butterscotch Butler, the female version of Pipe Mentor Butler. He also discovered that the Ice Queen also acts like the Ice King and composes fairy tales about a world similar to the one she lives in, but with opposite races. In the fictional world created by the Ice Queen, the protagonists of the story are the human Flynn and Jack the Raccoon. However, there are no other important things that we have discovered from these 5 stories told by the Ice King in this episode. And now, let's move on to the most important and last episode of Fionna and Cake's world. The 12th episode of the 9th season is titled Fionna, Cake, and Fionna. We see that the Ice King is holding a cultural gathering to tell the new Fionna and Cake stories he is writing in front of the general public. And this time, after he finished reading his new story, everyone was bored. As usual, no one enjoys the stories of the Ice King. But one of the attendees asked the Ice King, where does he come up with his story ideas? And the Ice King responded with a very strange response. He told him, "It is radiographically transmitted to my brain during the night." And suddenly a lady from the audience appears in the library who has been hiding for the entire time of the Ice King's narration of the story and wears clothes very similar to Fiona's. But she is old. She tells the Ice King that the story he told was completely wrong, and she knows that because she is Fionna. Is this Fionna? Has Fionna been a real character all this time? And she's grown up over the years, and now that she's old, she's come to correct the stories that the Ice King tells? We'll find out in a little while. Anyway, in order for old Fionna to prove to everyone that she is Fionna and that the story told by the Ice King was wrong, she releases a recorded video. It features an adventure of Fionna and Cake videotaped and playing the tape in front of everyone in the library. In the video, Fionna and Cake are shown venturing into a mysterious forest, where they break into a locked room, at the end of which is a statue in the shape of the lich's face. Fionna and Cake get a precious coffin full of precious stones from this room and take it to the treasure room. As they leave the treasure room, we notice a hand inside the coffin slowly opening it. And here the old Fionna stops the video and restores the tape, although the video is not finished yet. And this video proves that the world of Fionna and Cake is not just a fantasy world in the mind of the Ice King. It's bigger than that, because this video literally filmed Fionna and Cake. Oddly enough, they appeared inside the treehouse. At what time exactly was this video filmed? And where were Finn and Jake at the time? But there's something weirder than that. As we have seen, Simon documented the moments of his transformation into his crazy form on videotapes and was talking to the camera spontaneously, and there was no production. But this Fionna and Cake video had production in it, and the camera was shooting from more than professional angles. And there was a montage between the shots that are in different places. It is clearly a representative work of art. So this video that old Fionna reviewed proves that Fionna and Cake is more like a TV show. This means that Fionna and Cake are TV characters. Remember this point because we will return to it and elaborate on it a little later. But how did this old woman get this video? Because nothing about a TV show named Fionna and Cake was ever mentioned in any of the episodes of Adventure Time. That means if Fionna and Cake were a TV show being broadcast in Ooland, we'd be hearing the other characters talking about it. Anyway, we know how much the Ice King wished to meet Fionna. The Ice King went to her and told her that he was always confident that he would meet her someday. He becomes her best friend and asks her to continue showing the tape. She was convinced and turned on the tape, completing the events of the story. And we see that the person who was in the coffin is a living mummy, and when Fionna and Cake see him, they feel that he is too cute to be a mummy. That's when the old woman stops the video again and pulls out the tape. The Ice King tells her that he wants to see more, so she tells him that she doesn't want to harm the tape. It's the only copy she has, and it's very important to her. The Ice King asks her what she is going to do now, and she tells him that she is going back to the place where she lives, which is a garbage dump located under a bridge, and that she has neither a TV nor a sofa, which is suspicious. And when the Ice King found out about it, he invited her directly to move to his mansion. And not only that, he also begged her to live with him. And immediately she agreed. And at night, when the old Fionna enters the palace of the Ice King, we notice that she looks left and right, as if looking for something. While exploring the palace, the Ice King asked her a very logical question. "Where's Cake?" She replied that Cake had died a few years ago. Fionna added, "She's uncomfortable." Speaking of which, old Fionna then asks the Ice King to show her the Fionna and Cake videos he owns. He replies to her that he can't, and that's simply because he doesn't have videos at all. He goes on to say that he has a lot of tapes, but they are secret tapes, and they are the tapes with which he was recording his memoirs. And when the old Fionna heard this, she was even more curious to see the secret tapes. And she decided to supplement him with the mummy video, which she was reviewing in the library. He might change his mind and show her his secret tapes. We see Fionna and Cake dancing and playing with the mummy in the treehouse, because the mummy is cute and not dangerous. But suddenly the mummy stops dancing and says that she has a curse that can only be stopped with delicious muffins from the Breakfast Kingdom. This speech stirred the spirit of heroism within Fionna and Cake, so they decided to save the mummy and went out of the treehouse to get the cakes from the Breakfast Kingdom. The mummy stayed alone in the treehouse, and as soon as Fionna and Cake came out, the mummy laughed a malicious laugh. Old Fionna then turns off the TV and says that this is the end of the tape, and pulls the tape and tells the Ice King that she needs a lot of sleep because she is a hero. After Fionna falls asleep, the Ice King quietly enters her room in the middle of the night, holding a sandwich, and replaces the tape she is holding with the sandwich so that she does not feel that something has changed. And he plays the tape on the TV wearing headphones so as not to make a loud sound. And he discovers that the tape already has a sequel. Old Fionna lied to him. Fionna and Cake have returned from the Breakfast Kingdom with the cakes ordered by the mummy. They search everywhere for the mummy until they find it in the treasure room. She grabs a bag and collects gold coins and treasure room jewelry in it. The mummy tries to escape from the house, but Cake removes the paper rolls that were on it. And we find out that she is the Queen of Oo, the female version of the King of Oo. And now, in order to look good and that she wasn't stealing, she literally told them that they should thank her because she was stealing their treasures to teach them an important lesson. And don't let strangers into your house, no matter how cool they look. And finally, the video ends, and as I mentioned at the beginning, it looks like a TV episode with a plot and not an improvisational video. As for the Ice King, here it is concluded that the old Fionna did not want to make him see the end of the video because she is not Fionna at all. And she is the mummy. Of course, this is not true, but at least the Ice King has become sure that the old Fionna is a liar, and she is not the real Fionna. The Ice King turns his face to where old Fionna is sleeping and discovers that she has disappeared. He gets very scared and grabs the fly bat and walks quietly and looks left and right and finds her in his old tape room looking angrily. He storms into the room, yelling at her and ordering her to show herself for who she really is. He hits her in the face with a fly swatter, and she removes her white hat, and it is revealed that she is a mutant rabbit species creature. She's not Fionna, and she's not the mummy. She is an ordinary old lady. The lady explains that in the past she was very shy, so a flashback shows her many years ago where she was alone and was living in a cave full of appliances and televisions. She was spending the night working on these devices at home, but one night she received an unusual signal through one of the devices she was working on. The video of the adventure of Fionna, Cake, and the mummy appeared on TV. This video made her surprised. I watched it more than 100 times over the following days, and I kept it on tape. This lady has become so obsessed with Fionna and Cake that she decided to wear the same clothes as Fionna and came out of her cave. I decided to live a life of commuting and traveling for many years, and by chance I found a sign announcing that the Ice King would be reading Fionna and Cake's stories at the O-Land Library the next day. Finally, this old lady found someone else who knows Fionna and Cake, so she decided to go to the library and listen to his stories and decided to trick the Ice King and lie to him and tell him that she is Fionna, and she's living in a garbage dump. She also teased him by showing a short part of her video without finishing it at the end, in order to get him to invite her to his house so that she can steal the Fionna and Cake tapes he owns. This lady thought it was impossible that the stories of Fionna and Cake that the Ice King tells could have been written by him. The stories he tells in the library must be stories he's seen in Fionna and Cake's tapes. She has searched for many years in the land of Ooh, and she knows that there is no other source for Fionna and Cake's stories other than videos. She herself received a video of Fionna and Cake via her TV set, and when she found the Ice King telling stories about Fionna and Cake, she thought he was like her. The Ice King replies to her that he does not have any tapes about Fionna and Cake. The woman shouts at him, saying that she knows it. All this rummaging through his things, and all I found were tapes about his diary. He replies to her that if he met Fionna and Cake in reality, he would definitely film it. And the lady responds to him with a very important response. She said, "Fionna and Cake aren't real, asshole. It's just a TV show from the past or something like that." And the only episode that has survived so far from that program is the episode of Fionna and Cake and the Mummy, which was broadcast from an unknown source and received by this old lady's devices and kept on a tape recorder. But the strange thing is how Fionna and Cake predicted in the form and characters of the Ooh land that will exist in the future. Why people living in the land of Ooh currently appeared on the Fionna and Cake show that was broadcast in the distant past. Or it's possible that Fionna and Cake is not a TV show, and the mummy ring signal was broadcast by an unknown person, and maybe his identity will be revealed in the Fionna and Cake series, and this old lady just received the signal. And she thought it was an old TV show, because she couldn't think of anything else that made sense. However, the poor Ice King is heartbroken after the lady calls him a fool. He runs out of the room crying, and the lady catches up with him and tells him that she didn't mean to hurt him. He tells her, "You lied to me. Fionna would never have done that." Here, the lady notices that the Ice King is right. She does not look like Fionna, but like a mummy. In the story, the mummy lied to Fionna and Cake so that she could steal their treasures from inside their house. And this lady lied to the Ice King so that she could steal Fionna and Cake tapes from inside his palace. The lady then walks out of the Ice King's palace feeling guilty and blaming herself for what she has done. And the Ice King remains in his palace crying. And then he gets tired and goes to sleep. And in a very mysterious scene in the middle of the night, we see the Ice King sleeping on his bed, and a red ray from the sky enters from his bedroom window, directly towards his head, and the beam carries drawings and sounds of Fionna and Cake. which is exactly what the Ice King said earlier when he was asked about the source of his story ideas about the world of Fionna and Cake, and he said, "They radiograph my brain during the night, and the Ice King was honest and not joking, but what is the source of these mysterious radiations, and why is it being broadcast to the Ice King in particular? And is the source of these radiations the same source of the strange signal that the old lady received on her device? Is it possible that the world of Fionna and Cake is real and exists in another dimension? And somehow they are trying to connect with this dimension. But why is it being broadcast to the Ice King in particular? And will he succeed in fulfilling his promise made to meet Fionna and Cake on the ground? And there are a lot of other questions that we will probably know the answer to in the next Fionna and Cake series in a few months. And now you know everything about Fionna and Cake up to this moment. Share your theories in the comments, and that's all about Fionna and Cake.